This is A Thirst for Knowledge, written by Chad Bartlett and read by Chad Bartlett. Wami Kim was discharged from the hospital after 24 hours observation, and with only minor cuts and abrasions, and nothing that would leave a physical scar. There were other scars. Police always had scars. If Detective Wami were more poetically inclined, she would say that her career had etched trauma on her soul or her heart. She never had time for poetry or any other literary pursuit, which, upon reflection, would have made her realise how lucky she had been to see her last assignment and not a life successfully concluded. The detective was not one for reading or introspection. The debriefing lasted well into the evening, and it was after dinner before she returned to her apartment and fell asleep on her sofa in the warm glow of a popular Korean audition show on a huge TV. As she drifted off to sleep, she thought of her old neighbourhood and the expensive private school that her parents could not afford to send her to. That had probably saved her life last night. Everyone in the department knew of the case. It was a serial murder, but security was tight and details had thus far been kept out of the press. Every 3 years there were murders, each set in a different province, but always teachers, always with brains removed through a precise hole made in the corner of the victim's left orbital socket. With 2 teachers dead, both of whom worked at a prestigious after-school academy, Wami's boss had told her to go undercover at the glorified tutoring service. This was the first time that 2 victims had shared a place of employment, and it was a matter of time before word got out. Some parents had already pulled their kids in spite of police presence and security in the school. Wami's boss was cavalier at the best of times and was not overly concerned with the children's safety. No kids had ever been killed after all, and this was his chance to catch a killer that had flouted the law for 12 years. This could make his career, and also the career of any young detective who contributed. Wami didn't think in those terms. Her last boyfriend said she had lacked the imagination of the truly ambitious. That wasn't it though. Wami just liked doing the job, especially the undercover parts. It was kind of like acting. She'd always wanted to be an actress, but knew that no one would ever give her that. Her dad was a police officer, so she'd become a police officer. Her dad had become a detective, so she became a detective. But where her dad possessed a mind like a razor, Wami showed a flair for undercover work. Her dad was smart, but she was good under pressure. Not because she didn't feel it, but because she didn't show it. Not on the job, anyway. Once the work was done, it was a different story. She found herself sobbing as she drifted in and out of sleep. Covered by a crochet blanket her grandmother had made her, she shivered, remembering the cold of the handcart, and the panic at being restrained rose in her again. She was back in the convenience store on the ground floor of ABC School. Someone was muscling her on the cart, moving it over to the slushy machine. The cart nearly tipped over as she was turned around to face the door. The street outside was dark and deserted. Wami woke perspiring and she pottered about her apartment for a bit. She washed some dishes and noted that her suit was still out at the dry cleaners. What would she wear to the inquiry later that week? Wardrobe choice would be the least of her worries, she knew. The things she had put in her report and said at the debrief might just be enough to end her career. At least it was the truth. Her partner had cursed her out for an idiot, saying that even if it was true, she should have lied. She sat on a sofa and started to put away the papers from the case file and her notes that sprawled on a coffee table like Friday night drunks across the benches in a Seoul subway station. The photos of the 2 victims were in her hand, not the evidence photos from the murder scenes their respective apartments had become, but the mugshots from their school ID cards. Nami Kang had taught Korean literature and had been very popular with the students of ABC school because she was quick-witted and personable. The kids did not take to Wami like they had Nami, much to the disappointment of the director of the school, Mrs. Lee. The policewoman was prettier than Nami, so the boys liked her, but the girls had complained that her classes were dull and uninspired, another reason that she was still alive, most likely. Wami chastised herself for thinking too much and flipped the second photo over in her hand. He was Jake Peterson, an American English teacher, who had looked like he could have been an actor too. She could have looked at his picture all night, but she remembered the security footage of the hall outside his apartment. She looked at his photo anyway and tried to think only about his face and not the grim video she had subjected herself to over and over, trying to identify his killers. The picture slipped out of her hand as she fell asleep again. She dreamed of the video. The hall was dim, but not entirely black. Two childlike figures emerged from the inky blackness further down near the elevator doors, and the darkness stuck to them like oil to a penguin. Their legs did not appear to move as they coasted up to Jake's door. It was probably a glitch in the video, which was grainy and low-res like a 90s arcade machine. One or both, it was hard to tell, knocked on the door, and even in the poor image the rhythm of their knock was obvious. It was the beat of the song "We Will Rock You" by Queen. Boom, boom, chick. Boom, boom, chick. Before all of this, Wami had quite liked the song. Not anymore. It was the bell that signalled the change of class at ABC school. It popped up everywhere in this case. The knocking continued, relentlessly, as in the song. Then the door opened. Light outlined the shadows of the children on the wall opposite the door, but it did not illuminate them. The shadowy figures moved inside the apartment, and the door closed, leaving the hallway dark. Wami had watched that footage many times right to the end. At no point had anyone entered or emerged from Jake's apartment through that door. The likelihood of anyone getting out any other way was very low. The apartment was on the 14th floor and the fire escape equipment had not been deployed. The dream shifted and Wami found herself tied to the handcart again. Mrs. Lee stepped around it and faced her. The school director was well groomed and did not look any of her 50 years. Her below-the-knee skirt, matching jacket and glasses framed dark brown eyes which showed her as the intelligent, competent woman she was. She looked like the director of a successful school and not like a serial murderer at all. When Wami had first met her, the woman had had red, tear-stained cheeks of someone in mourning. She'd lost 2 key staff whom she'd called friends. Her reputation and livelihood were in jeopardy, and she looked the part. In the dim light of the convenience store, all that was gone and was replaced by a woman of calculating intelligence. She straightened her clothes after laying out large sheets of plastic on the floor. Satisfied that any mess would be limited to the covered areas, she wheeled Wami onto the covered plastic and looked her over, as though she were a problematic variable she was trying to solve out of an equation. "Just so you know, it won't hurt for long. Only a second or two," said Mrs. Lee. "What won't hurt?" said the detective with the slur of the Mickey she'd been slipped. It addled her speech as well as her thoughts. Mrs. Lee stopped fussing with the duct tape she was using to secure the edges of the plastic and looked at Wami askance. "Being killed. It will be over very quickly. The children are not cruel. You won't suffer. If you don't struggle, it will be even quicker. But most people thrash about a bit in spite of the obvious helplessness of their situation. I always explain, but most don't listen and they struggle. Still, it only prolongs things by a couple of seconds. Best to relax if you can and let them get it over with." "Let who get what over with?" asked Wami. "The children killing you. I might have drugged you a bit too heavily. I hope this won't be a problem. The children prefer the donors to be a little more lucid." replied Mrs. Lee. She checked Wami's pupils, which were by turns tiny dots and then rapidly expanding black holes threatening to engulf her irises. You don't look good. Light fled the little convenience store, and it became colder. Mrs. Lee said something else and turned to look at the doors. Inside, outlined by the dim streetlight, stood 2 children, swaddled completely in darkness. Kids, grumbled Wami. Past your bedtime. Off you go now. Bye-bye. You used too much sedative. She's confused. We shall have to wait it out, said the little girl in disappointment, her voice edged with just a little petulance. Well, you're going to be waiting a long time, because I'm confused most of the time. The 2 children looked at each other. I'm confused about why I dumped my last boyfriend. I'm confused how you 2 got out of both victims' apartments. I'm confused about what Mrs. Lee is doing here. We had her checked out and everything came back clear. I'm confused about why you upped your timeline. Every other murder had at least 9 days between them. Mostly, right now, I'm confused about how to get out of here. Wami couldn't see their faces, but she knew their expressions were question marks. The school director shuffled nervously over to the handcart and checked Wami's eyes again, this time with the light of a phone. In the brief flash, Wami thought she saw shadows retreat from the children, leaving their true forms exposed. They were squat creatures, unmistakably old, with skewer-like fingers, sharp and dangerous. Then the shadows cloaked them again. Yeah, said Wami flatly. Probably a good thing you're going to kill me. No one would ever believe what I'd have to write in my report after seeing that. You are going to kill me, right? Of course, said Mrs. Lee. But even through her flashing pupils, Wami could see the look the children gave each other. They have to kill you. You figured it out, said Mrs. Lee. The murders? Asked Wami, playing up the confusion, even though she wasn't really playing it up. Yes, the murders. Well, I haven't really worked out all of the details as such. I mean, I presume it was the shadowy children there. We have security camera footage of shadowy children going into Jake's apartment. Not that it would stand up in court. A decent lawyer would probably be able to have it excluded from the trial, just on how grainy it is. Not clear enough for an ID, and even if it were, maybe they were just getting some extra tutoring. Foreigners do that all the time. Mrs. Lee, said the boy's voice. She does not appear to know much. It had flecks of condescension in it, such as when a 6-year-old explains a favourite movie to an unfamiliar adult. Sadly, you're right there. I haven't even got a motive. I suggested drug-related revenge crime to my boss, but I was just grasping, said Wami. The children advanced a couple of steps into the room and stood at the edge of the plastic. So you don't even know about the slushy machine? Mrs. Lee thumped the frozen drink machine that churned away at the mysterious pink semi-frozen liquid in its clear hopper. No, I'm trying to cut down on sugar, so, It's where we put the pureed brains, exclaimed Mrs. Lee, letting her exasperation show. Oh, that's just yuck. I suppose killing me is one way to keep the health department out of your business. It's not our business. That's the beauty of it. The convenience store sells the slushies. The kids buy them because of the voodoo the shadow children do to the brains we use to top up the machines. My students are the primary customers. Their GPA goes up. Word gets around and my school gets more kids, more money for me. You must have had some idea or you wouldn't be here. Well, I am here, so well done me, Wami said, and the sarcasm was audible in her own ears through the thinning drug-induced white noise. She hoped it was white noise, not tinnitus. Not sure what the little demon spawn get out of the deal. Souls, the 2 intoned. You had no idea, did you? Accused Mrs. Lee. Nope. But I heard you talking on the phone to your superiors. You said you had it all but solved. I was using but in its exclusionary sense. You didn't have a clue? No. She's not the smartest person in the room, intoned the children, and their voices carried an undertone octaves lower than their own, resonating like an organ made of all the tombstones in the cemetery. Their heads turned to look at the school director. No. She's playing us. Her resume was impeccable, fluent in Mandarin, English, and something called Urdu, MIT undergrad, Stanford grad school, and then recruited by Seoul Police Special Investigations Unit. She backed away from the children. I may have had to pad my resume just a little to get you to let me go undercover here. This place is pretty exclusive, mumbled Wami apologetically. Thank you, said Mrs. Lee, who was backing away from the children slowly. Not the smartest in the room, and we do thirst for knowledge. The children leapt, and Wami woke up on the sofa. She was sweating. Mrs. Lee was dead, just like Handsome Jake and all of the other victims. There was a knock at the door. She got up to answer it. No one in their right mind would be visiting her at this hour. The blinded windows cast a dim and eerie light into the room. There was another knock. Boom, boom, chick. She steadied herself and looked out of the peephole. Nothing. The hallway lights had been out for days and the maintenance man had been ill, so the bulbs had not been changed. Her heart raced, but she had to know. She knew curiosity was a sign of intelligence, but she had to know. She fetched her sidearm from the coffee table, and there was the knock again. Boom, boom, chick. Not the smartest in the room, huh? Maybe not, but she was certainly the most peeved off and well armed. She flung the door open and fired twice, the muzzle flash illuminating the hall enough for her to realize her mistake too late. The delivery man dropped to dry cleaning and limped down the hallway to the elevator, screaming and swearing as he ran, leaving a trail of urine. Heads popped out of doorways and back again as her neighbours saw the gun at her side, lit by the dim light of her apartment. A police siren started to wail in the distance, and she waited. I really am not the smartest in the room, she grumbled, closing the door. We know, said two childlike voices. This is the end of A Thirst for Knowledge. It's been a Killopotamus production. If you enjoyed this ambient story, I'd love for you to share it on social media. For more weird stories, have a look at killopotamus.com and sign up for a newsletter which I'll write as soon as I have any news. Don't worry about spam, because honestly that kind of thing looks like a lot of work. If that's not for you, the newsletter, not the spam, of course no one likes spam, then I'm somewhat active on social media such as X and YouTube. Maybe you could subscribe and like if you're so inclined. Once again, you've been listening to A Thirst for Knowledge, written by Chad Bartlett, produced by him as well. He also wrote the music, which you can find on iTunes or Spotify, those kinds of things. Text copyright 2024 by Chad Bartlett, audio copyright 2024 by Chad Bartlett, all rights reserved.